She is one of the most revered figures in all of history. Her name echoes through churches, songs, and prayers for over 2,000 years. But have you ever wondered where she walked? Where exactly did Mary live? What lands were touched by the feet of the one who carried the Son of God in her womb? There are mysteries hidden among ancient stones, silent hills, and forgotten ruins that may reveal a story far greater than we ever imagined. A journey that goes beyond the verses, and one that may forever change how we see this extraordinary woman. The Bible gives us only fragments of Mary's life, brief glimpses, short passages, words that reveal the essential but don't tell the whole story. However, Christian tradition, historical records, and accounts preserved for centuries hold fascinating details about the paths she walked, from her quiet childhood in Nazareth to the silent, sorrowful days in Jerusalem. From the grotto in Bethlehem to a secluded house in the mountains of Turkey, every place holds something sacred, something you may have never heard before. Get ready to travel through time. We will walk stone-paved roads once trodden by ancient caravans, visit cities that became centers of pilgrimage, step into homes and temples that still carry the scent of faith passed down through generations. You'll discover where Mary was visited by the angel Gabriel, where she gave birth in the midst of poverty and persecution, where she wept at the foot of the cross, and where she may have spent her final days on earth. But this is not just a historical investigation, it's a spiritual journey, because to understand where Mary walked is to understand how she lived. It's to dive into a story of unwavering faith, silent courage, and unconditional love. Each place holds a memory, a pain, a promise. And it's in the trail of these invisible footprints that we'll find answers, and perhaps even more questions. This video is an invitation to discover the unseen, to hear the echo of ancient footsteps among the ruins of Nazareth, to feel the silence of the cave in Bethlehem, to imagine the weight of grief in the heart of Jerusalem, and to unravel the mystery of a house hidden in the mountains of Ephesus. Mary's story is deeply intertwined with the sacred geography of Christianity, and now you're about to experience it like never before. So, if this story has already touched your heart, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel Simplifying the Verses, and tell us in the comments, which of these places have you heard about before? Or which one sparks your curiosity the most? Share this with someone who loves diving deep into biblical stories, because what we're about to reveal will surprise even the most devout hearts. And it all begins in a simple village, forgotten by the powerful of the ancient world, but chosen by God as the beginning of it all. A place called Nazareth. Nazareth, a forgotten village on the outskirts of Galilee. There were no walls, no bustling marketplaces. It was a rural settlement, almost anonymous, with fewer than 500 inhabitants during Mary's time. A place where time seemed to move slowly, where dust mingled with the faith of a people living under the shadow of the Roman Empire. Nazareth wasn't mentioned in ancient prophecies or historical texts before the New Testament, so much so that Nathanael, upon hearing of Jesus, mocked, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" John 1:46. And yet, it was precisely there that everything began. Mary was born and raised in that environment of simplicity. She was a teenager when her story intersected with the destiny of the world. She wasn't known for her appearance or social status. Her days were filled with household tasks, prayers, and Jewish traditions. Like every young Hebrew girl, she likely dreamed of starting a family, having children, and living in peace. But within her was something heaven saw and the world overlooked, a heart completely available to God. It was in the midst of that ordinary routine that the extraordinary was revealed. The angel Gabriel descended with a message that still echoes today. "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." Luke 1:28. Mary, startled and afraid, didn't understand at first what was happening. After all, how could a young virgin conceive a child? But Gabriel was clear. The one to be born from her would be called the Son of the Most High. And in the face of the unexplainable, she didn't demand proof. She simply replied, "Behold, the handmaid of the Lord." With that response, the invisible touched the visible. The eternal Word became flesh. And Nazareth, the village without glory, became sacred ground. Heaven and earth met in the womb of a young girl, and it all began there, without the world even noticing. The impact of that moment can still be felt in the stones of the Basilica of the Annunciation, built in the heart of Nazareth. Many believe the site marks the very spot where Mary received the angel's visit. The walls of the basilica hold inscriptions in dozens of languages left by pilgrims from all over the world. Each one is a testimony to how that single yes changed the course of humanity. Behind the main altar, a simple Latin inscription resonates deeply. Verbum caro hic factum est. Here, the word became flesh. It's not just a phrase, it's a revelation, the greatest of all. Archaeologists have uncovered remnants of dwellings from Mary's time beneath the current structure. Simple stone constructions with cisterns and low walls. These ruins preserve not only physical remains, but spiritual memories, an ancient echo of a story that transformed the world through silence and humility. Modern-day Nazareth still carries much of the old. Despite modernization, you can still walk streets that preserve the atmosphere of the past. The local markets, the hidden sanctuaries, the homes carved into the rock. Everything seems to whisper the same story. This is where it all began. But Nazareth also teaches us something deeper. It shows us that God doesn't look for the great, the qualified, the popular. He looks for the available, the willing, those who say yes, even without understanding all the details. Mary didn't have all the answers, but she trusted, and that is the greatest miracle Nazareth teaches us. Faith that is born in the ordinary, but produces the eternal. How often do we despise our own Nazareths? Those places in our lives that seem far from glorious, where everything feels too small. But it's in those very places that God often writes the opening chapters of his greatest works. And so, Mary, carrying a miracle within her, began her journey. Nazareth was no longer just a village. It had become the starting point of a new covenant between God and mankind. The womb of that young girl was now the living temple of the Savior, and the world would never be the same. But there was a decree that would alter her path, an unexpected summons from Rome that would force Joseph and Mary to leave Nazareth and set out on a journey. And it is in the city of Bethlehem, along dusty roads and beneath the chill of a silent night, that the divine promise would become visible to the eyes of the world. The road from Nazareth to Bethlehem is more than just a geographical route. It's a path filled with tension, expectation, and mystery. Mary, now pregnant, set out with Joseph in obedience to a decree from Emperor Caesar Augustus. Everyone had to register in their ancestral hometown. Joseph, being of David's lineage, had to go to Bethlehem, the city of the king. The journey was long, about 150 kilometers of climbing and descending through valleys, plains, and dirt roads. There was no luxury, no comfort, only the challenge of a woman about to give birth, facing fatigue, the chill of the night, and dust that seemed to cling to the soul. Bethlehem, whose name means house of bread, was small, yet it carried a prophetic weight. David was born there, and the Messiah was also to be born there, just as the prophet Micah foretold. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel. Micah 5:2. It was the precise fulfillment of a promise made centuries earlier. But what Mary and Joseph found there was not glory or honor. It was rejection. The inns were full, doors closed one by one. And so, the Savior of the world was born among animals, in a rustic stable, and laid in a manger, an improvised cradle for the King of the universe. There, amidst the smell of hay and the silence of night, the heavens did not remain silent. A choir of angels broke through the skies, announcing to shepherds that something extraordinary had just happened. And these very shepherds, simple men, were the first to witness the miracle. Not kings, not scribes, but the humble, like Mary, like Joseph. Bethlehem became the stage for one of the most sacred moments in human history, the birth of Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. But the story doesn't remain calm for long. Soon after the birth, a new threat arises. Wise men from the east, guided by a star, arrive in Jerusalem seeking the King of the Jews who has been born. Herod, the paranoid ruler, feels threatened. What began with wonder turns to fear. He orders the massacre of all boys under the age of 2 in Bethlehem, a silent, cruel act that stained the city with the blood of innocents. Warned in a dream, Joseph receives a divine command, flee. And so Mary, a new mother, vulnerable, exhausted, sets out with the child and her husband to a foreign land, Egypt, a land with a complicated past for the Hebrews. It had been a place of refuge, but also of slavery. Now it became a sanctuary. Mary went from being the mother of the Messiah to a refugee, from a woman highly favored to a foreigner. In this moment, her faith was tested in a profound way. To imagine Mary with a baby in her arms, crossing deserts and seeking refuge in a strange land, is to understand that God's plan doesn't eliminate pain. It transforms pain into redemption. No angel came to surround her with comfort. No crowds came to cheer her. Only the quiet trust that the same God who made the promise would care for her. And he did. Coptic Christian tradition preserves to this day accounts of places the Holy Family passed through in Egypt. Churches have been built, caves preserved, wells maintained. In every corner, stories whisper that the Son of God passed through, hidden, protected, exiled. During this time, Mary was more than a mother. She was the guardian of the miracle. She nursed, protected, prayed, and waited, not knowing when or how, for the moment to return. After Herod's death, once again an angel appears to Joseph, granting permission to return. Mary then goes back, not to Bethlehem, but to where it all began, Nazareth. The flight ends. The mission, however, is just beginning, and it's impossible not to reflect on the weight of this chapter. Mary wasn't only chosen to bear the Savior, she was also tested, hunted, humiliated, and exiled, but she never gave up. The journey to Bethlehem and the flight to Egypt are not just isolated episodes. They are powerful lessons in courage, trust, and obedience, even when everything seems out of control. But if Bethlehem was the place where the Son of God was born, Jerusalem would be the place where he would give his life, and Mary would be there once again, not just as a mother, but as a silent witness to the greatest pain ever endured by a human heart. The city of Jerusalem pulses like the heart of the ancient world. Its stones have witnessed empires, wars, promises, and betrayals. For the Jews, it was the center of faith. For the Romans, a strategic point of control. For Mary, it would become the setting of the deepest sorrow of her life. She had followed Jesus from the beginning of his ministry, walked beside him through the villages of Galilee, saw crowds follow him, witnessed miracles that defied logic. But she also saw the rejection grow, the tension build, and the shadow of the cross draw near. Jerusalem swelled with people during the Passover. Pilgrims filled the streets, Roman authorities reinforced their watch, and religious leaders plotted in silence. Jesus entered the city riding a donkey, a sign of peace, and was welcomed with palm branches and shouts of "Hosanna!" Mary watched in silence. She knew something was coming. Perhaps she didn't fully understand it, but she could feel it. Every mother can. The days that followed were like a storm on the brink of breaking. The temple was cleansed, his teachings grew sharper, the threats more evident. Jesus was betrayed, arrested, tried in secret, and condemned, and then the unthinkable happened. The boy she had cradled, the young man she saw grow in wisdom, the one who healed and forgave, now carried a cross through the streets of Jerusalem. Mary was there, unable to touch him, unable to protect him, just watching. The Gospel of John says she stood at the foot of the cross, John 19:25. And that carries a weight beyond words. She saw the nails pierce her son's hands, heard the cries, the insults, the silence of heaven, and she remained, steadfast, broken, but present. She didn't flee, she didn't hide. On the cross, Jesus looked at her and at John, the beloved disciple, and said, "Woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother." John 19:26-27. In that moment, Jesus entrusted Mary to John's care, a gesture of love in the midst of agony. A son, even in death, thinking of his mother. That moment reveals the greatness of Mary's soul. She didn't protest, didn't demand justice. She simply suffered with dignity, with faith. Her pain became part of the redemption plan itself. Because on that day, she didn't just lose a son, she lost the Son of God. According to ancient Christian traditions, Mary remained in Jerusalem after the resurrection. She saw the empty tomb, heard the disciples' accounts, felt the joy mixed with grief. Some ancient texts, like the Acts of the Apostles, mention her being with the disciples in the upper room, praying on the day of Pentecost. She didn't disappear. She remained strong in faith, supporting the newborn church. And this is where one of the greatest mysteries begins. Where did Mary spend her final years? Many believe she stayed in Jerusalem, specifically on Mount Zion, one of the city's highest points. There, beside the upper room, stands a place known as the Dormition of Mary, a church built over the site where, according to tradition, she fell asleep, that is, passed away. The doctrine of the Assumption, accepted by many Christians, teaches that Mary was taken into heaven, body and soul, but the place of her dormition is still surrounded by questions and differing interpretations. What is known is that the location atop Mount Zion became a symbol of Christian hope. Inside the Basilica of the Dormition, silence feels sacred. In the crypt below, there's a sculpture of Mary asleep, surrounded by columns and icons. Pilgrims from around the world come to pray, give thanks, and reflect, perhaps not because of the precise location, but because of what it represents, the end of the earthly journey of a woman who lived the divine through the ordinary. Mary faced rejection, exile, poverty, and death, but nothing shook her faith. In Jerusalem, she was not only a mother, she was a disciple, a witness, a guardian of hope. She saw the worst of humanity unfold and still believed in love. Her quiet presence in the most decisive moments of Christian history is a reminder that true power does not shout, it endures. Jerusalem marked Mary with sorrow, but also with promise. It was there that she saw her son die, and it was there that she saw him rise. The city that made her weep was the same one that confirmed her faith. And maybe, for that reason, it was chosen by God as the place to conclude her mission. But there is another theory that crosses borders and defies logic. A tradition preserved with great care claims that Mary left Jerusalem and followed John to an unexpected place, a hidden mountain in the region of Ephesus, in what is now Turkey. After the death and resurrection of Jesus, the paths of the disciples spread across the world. Missions, persecutions, and new beginnings marked the early years of the church. But one figure remains wrapped in mystery: Mary. Where did she go? The tradition pointing to Jerusalem as the place of her dormition is strong, yes. However, another narrative echoes through the quiet hills of Asia Minor, revealing an unexpected destination: Ephesus, in what is now Turkey. According to very ancient accounts, when Jesus entrusted Mary to the care of the Apostle John, he did not remain in Jerusalem forever. As persecution intensified and Christian communities grew beyond Judea, John is believed to have settled in Ephesus, one of the major centers of early Christianity, and with him he would have brought Mary. If true, it means she spent her final years far from the Holy Land, once again a refugee living in foreign lands. Ephesus was a grand city. With its colossal theater, marble streets and monumental temples, it was a cultural and religious hub of the Greco-Roman world. Among statues of pagan gods and bustling markets, John and Mary are said to have lived a quiet life, devoted to prayer, mutual care, and the strengthening of the faith. She, who had seen the Messiah born in Bethlehem and die in Jerusalem, now witnessed the beginning of the gospel's spread among the Gentiles. But how did this tradition gain strength? It all began in the 19th century with a German nun named Anne Catherine Emmerich. In detailed visions, which were later transcribed and published, she described a small stone house atop a hill in Ephesus, where Mary was said to have lived. The details in her visions were so specific that decades later, archaeologists and clergy went in search of the place. In 1891, guided by the nun's descriptions, they found ruins exactly as she had described, a stone house with a simple structure hidden among trees, with a small altar and a nearby water spring. Scholars were stunned by the accuracy. Soon, the site became known as the House of the Virgin Mary. Since then, this sanctuary has become one of Christianity's most revered pilgrimage sites. Not only for Catholics, but also for Christians of many denominations and even Muslims who hold Mary in high esteem. The site has been visited by religious leaders, scholars, and believers from around the world, all seeking spiritual connection through the story of this extraordinary woman. Mary's house in Ephesus is small, quiet, and surrounded by nature. There is no grandeur, only an atmosphere of deep reverence. Some say that crossing its stone threshold brings an indescribable peace, as if time itself slows down, as if the echoes of ancient prayers still linger in the air. And even without definitive archaeological proof confirming Mary's physical presence there, the site continues to draw those who seek more than evidence. They seek faith, connection, silence. For many scholars and Christians around the globe, what matters most is not geographical certainty, but what the place represents spiritually, a symbol of retreat, devotion, and hope. If she truly lived there, Mary would have spent her final years far from the crowds, in contemplation, in peace, beside the disciple Jesus loved. Having been a mother, an exile, a widow, and a witness of the cross, she would now become a teacher, a counselor, a living example of faith for a new generation of believers. The question remains, was that house truly the final home of the mother of Jesus? The Bible does not say, history does not confirm, but the mystery reveals something even deeper. It invites us to focus on what truly matters. Wherever Mary spent her last days, what remains is her legacy of obedience, humility, and unwavering faith. Ephesus offers us a new perspective on Mary, not merely as a passive figure in history, but as a woman who lived faith to its fullest, from promise to pain, from flight to solitude. If in Jerusalem she wept at the foot of the cross, perhaps in Ephesus she smiled as she saw faith bloom among the Gentiles. If that was her ending, it was also a new beginning for the church. And so, we complete the map of Mary's journey of faith, a path that began in Nazareth, crossed through Bethlehem, endured Jerusalem, and may have concluded in the silence of Ephesus. But more than the places, what remains is the impact of her story. Throughout this journey, we've followed in Mary's footsteps, not only across paths of stone and dust, but along trails of faith, silence, and obedience. From Nazareth to Bethlehem, from Jerusalem to Ephesus, each place we visited holds in its landscapes the marks of a woman who lived the fullness of grace with humility and courage. Her story is not merely geographical, it is spiritual, deeply human, and yet extraordinary. In Nazareth, we saw the beginning of it all. A forgotten village, chosen by God to be the setting of the greatest revelation in history. It was there, in the simplicity of daily life, that Mary said yes, a yes that has echoed through the centuries. She taught us that great purposes can be born from the most unlikely places, and that God does not seek the prepared, but the available. Bethlehem was the stage of birth, but also of discomfort and escape. Mary did not simply give birth. She learned to protect the miracle in the face of danger. As a refugee in Egypt, she became a symbol of all who walk foreign lands carrying invisible promises. In her silence, she revealed that trust often means moving forward without understanding the next step. Then in Jerusalem, she faced the kind of pain no mother should ever endure. She witnessed her son's death with eyes fixed on hope. There, at the foot of the cross, Mary becomes a mirror of perseverance. Her presence in that moment wasn't one of despair, but of surrender. She shows us that faith is not the absence of pain. It is standing firm, even in the pain. And in Ephesus, if she indeed spent her final days there, we see the closing of a sacred cycle. The woman who once walked beside the Savior now watches the gospel spread. She lives her final days with peace and purpose, not in the spotlight, but in prayer. Her life ends the same way it began, with silence and presence. Each place Mary passed through carries a fragment of her essence. Nazareth speaks of obedience, Bethlehem of courage, Jerusalem of surrender, Ephesus of endurance. These are not merely locations on a map. They are portals through which we understand the depth of a life marked by eternal purpose. And perhaps, by the end of this journey, the question that echoes is not just where did Mary live, but what did she leave us? Mary's true legacy goes far beyond historical landmarks. It is found in her posture toward mystery, in her faithfulness without demands, in her love that needed no words. It is in her faith, a faith that continues to inspire millions, generation after generation. That's why it doesn't matter whether she fell asleep in Jerusalem or in Ephesus. What matters is that her story is still alive, in whispered prayers during difficult times, in the yes we say when God calls us, in the deserts we walk through, protecting what's been entrusted to us, and at the foot of the crosses we endure, even without understanding. If this journey touched your heart, like this video, subscribe to the channel Simplifying the Verses, and share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Let us know in the comments. Had you heard of the places Mary passed through? Which one surprised you the most? Because in the end, these are not just places. They are living testimonies of a faith that cannot be explained, only lived.